Hi kids, welcome back. Hooray! I don't know if you've noticed, it is getting nicer outside. Have you guys been going outside for walks or to play outside? I hope so. It's been getting really nice. It's like spring. It's exciting. Okay, today we are going to talk again about Joseph. I'm super excited about it. This is kind of where it all comes together. This is the great part where you get to see what God knew all along, where you get to see what he's been doing this whole time. I mean, it's been a lifetime for Joseph, and now we get to see his plan and his grace, his goodness to us. I left the 5 G's of the gospel up this week. Last week, we talked a lot about glory and how Joseph and the faith that God gave Joseph brought God glory. Well, this week we are going to talk about grace. We see a glimpse of grace in the story today. What I mean by that is, even though this story happened hundreds and hundreds of years before the Messiah would come, someone's life in the story points straight to what the Messiah would do and what he would be like. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but somebody in the story does something, has an attitude, has a heart movement, like a heart change, and all of that is like whoosh, showing us Jesus, showing us the grace that we would get from God through Jesus on the cross. And so that's really exciting. I want you to wait to find out who it is. Is it Joseph? It might be. I don't know. I do know. I'll tell you and you'll find out. I'm going to pray just to start. Dear God, I thank you so much for the kids. I thank you for the families that bother to set this up and turn on their computers or their TVs and watch. I pray right now you would be with every single family as they watch this. Make it so clear. Help them to see you. Lord, you gave us all of this in your Bible so that we could know who you are, how good you are, how worthy you are of our praise, how you are the one that we can trust. And I pray the kids would see that and love you better for it, know you more for it, Lord God, and that this would be in them, this would produce in them, Lord, a life that just trusts you and loves you and worships you right till the very end. We ask this, Jesus, in your precious name. Amen. So now, that's where we are in our story. Joseph has been living through 7 years of plenty. He's got building projects on the go. I mean, he's building storehouses. He's building barns. He's got this whole thing where he's got people and servants collecting grains, storing them in the storehouses, making sure they've got a fifth, making sure they've got enough. That's what he's been doing for 7 years. And then spring comes on the 8th year, and the farmers go out to sow. Guess what happens? Maybe the Nile River doesn't flood that year, but nothing grew. There was no harvest. Nobody could plant anything, and there was nothing to harvest. Nothing grew. Then the next spring happens. Again, the same thing. They can't plant anything. The land is dry, and there's no way they're going to harvest anything because nothing's been growing. I can imagine kids, a farmer, looking out from like Egypt where his house would have been and over the farmland, and he can't even tell where the desert is and where the farmland begins. It's all brown. It all looks like sand, and the wind whips past, and there's dust in the air, and he's remembering the fertile crops, all the green. He would have looked out and it would have stretched on green forever, and then you would see way in the background the sand dunes of the desert. Now it's all brown. They're like, what are we going to do? This is the 2nd year. What are we going to do? Everybody panics. Everybody's worried. But Pharaoh's not worried. Pharaoh knows what's going on because God told Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's put Joseph in charge. And Joseph isn't worried. Joseph knows what's going on. Joseph has been collecting the food, and now it's time. He opens those storehouses and he sells the food to the people of Egypt, and they have enough. I want you to remember a family. There's another family living right now. They don't live in Egypt. They live in Canaan. There are a special family chosen by God, Jacob and his 11 sons. And yes, I said 11. Benjamin has been born. Okay, Benjamin was born to Joseph's mother, Rachel. So this is Joseph's little brother, his full younger brother. It's now Jacob's youngest son, and he is Jacob's favorite son now. He loves Benjamin. And Benjamin is much younger than all the other sons. Well, Jacob, his 11 sons, their wives, their kids, so Jacob's grandkids, they're all living, and the famine has hit them too. They don't have enough food. The harvest didn't come. Maybe the grass now is just like stubbly, brown, dry stuff, and their flocks can't graze properly. They're in trouble. They need food badly. They need grain or they're going to die. And then news comes. They get word. Egypt has grain. Dad, I heard someone say they've been to Egypt. There are storehouses of grain in Egypt. They have enough. They're selling the extra to other people. Egypt has grain. And Jacob knows what he has to do. He asks his 10 older sons. They're going to go to Egypt and they're going to buy grain for the family. I mean, they have money. They just don't have any food. So they're going to go and buy the grain. But he keeps Benjamin with him. Jacob doesn't let Benjamin go. Why not, kids? He's so sad still after losing Joseph, his favorite, that he won't let Benjamin go. But he sends the 10 older brothers along with money. They're going to head to Egypt. They're going to buy grain in Egypt, and that's the plan. So the sons, the brothers, they're men now. I always want to call them boys. They're men, okay? They travel to Egypt on their donkeys. They've got a mission. They've got the money. They're going to buy the grain. And they're brought before the man in charge of Egypt. These are the same 10 brothers that sold Joseph into slavery years and years ago. That's it. All of them are there, the 10 of them. And they come before the guy in charge. Well, who's in charge? The governor. There's no one in Egypt greater than the governor. You're going to have to see the governor if you want to buy grain. Well, we know who the governor is. It's Joseph, right? And Joseph, I can imagine he spent the day, maybe it's been a long day. Tons of people come before him. He interviews them. Then he says to his servants, okay, this family, they're going to buy this much grain. Pay these guys over here. They'll load your camels for you. And then they go on their way. Well, a new group is brought in front of him. 10 men. They all bow low to the ground before him. They bow down to Joseph. And, of course, they're going to ask him for grain too. And as they bow down, maybe the oldest brother looks up to start to speak, to make his request. And Joseph is looking into the eyes of Reuben, his oldest brother. And I only imagine that Joseph has his heart starts to beat fast. He has a mini heart attack maybe. He recognizes Reuben. And sure, he looks older, but it's him. And then he looks, and the next is Simeon. And there's Judah, there's Levi, there's Gad, there's Asher, there's Dan, there's Naphtali, all of them. Issachar, Zebulun, they're all there staring at him. And as he sees them, he sees their faces, how they've aged a little bit. They're a little bit older, but they're his brothers. And they don't recognize him. What does Joseph do? Well, Joseph has an interpreter with him, a translator, a man who speaks Egyptian and a man who would speak the languages of the countries that have been coming to see Egypt, right, to try and buy grain. Joseph doesn't tell his brothers who he is. He doesn't even speak to them in Hebrew. He keeps on speaking Egyptian to the translator, and the translator explains stuff to the brothers in Hebrew, and Joseph decides he's going to speak to them roughly. That's what the Bible says, like rough, not super nice and sweet, okay? And he says, where do you come from? And the translator asks them, and they say, well, from the land of Canaan. Who are you? They don't know what to say. We need grain. We need to come and buy grain. You're spies. You are spies, and you've come here to see how bad it is in Egypt. You're coming to check out the land and see how bad our land is. They're like, no, we're not spies. We're not spies. Well, there's 10 of you. Well, we're 10 brothers. We're 10 brothers from our family. 10 brothers from the same family? Yeah, one father, same family. We even have a younger brother. We left him back at home. No, you're spies. I know what you've come to see, the nakedness of the land. And the nakedness would mean just what I was talking about, how barren the fields were, how they were dry and nothing was growing. That's what you've come to see. You're spies and you're going to die for it. No. We promised. There was 12 of us. One of us, he's gone. He's no more. He's dead. And the littlest brother, he's with our father back home. Who was the one they were talking about that was dead? Well, it was Joseph himself, right? That's who they meant. That's who they were talking about. Joseph says, no, you're spies. I don't believe you. Here's what's going to happen. You guys have to stay here in jail, and you're going to send one brother back, and he's going to get your youngest brother, and he's going to bring him to me to show me, to prove that you say you are who you say you are and what you say is true. And if you don't do that, you're all going to die. But 9 of you will stay in jail while that one brother goes back to get your youngest brother. That's what's going to happen. Otherwise, you're all dead for being spies, for being liars. For 3 days, Joseph leaves his brothers in jail. And I don't even know what they were thinking during that time in the jail. They must have been terrified. And they must have been thinking, to bring Benjamin here. Dad's going to freak out. What are we going to do? This is a mess. 3 days to think about what they've done and why they're there. And then Joseph comes back to them after 3 days and said, okay, if you do this, you will live, for I fear God. Instead, I'm going to let 9 of you go back home with the grain so that your family may live, with food for the journey, but 1 of you shall stay here. 1 of you will stay here in jail as my servant until you bring your youngest brother back and prove that you are who you said you are. Until that time, he stays in jail. Well, kids, Joseph said all of that to his brothers through the interpreter again, through the translator. And so after they hear this, 9 of you get to go free. 1 of us has to stay. We got to bring Benjamin back, or he's gonna kill maybe the one in jail. The one has to stay forever in jail as a servant. Like, this is a mess. And they start to talk amongst each other. And they're speaking in Hebrew, and they don't even think for 1 second that this Egyptian governor would be able to speak Hebrew. I mean, he's been using a translator to speak to them this whole time. But kids, does Joseph speak Hebrew? Of course he speaks Hebrew. He spoke Hebrew at home with his family the first 17 years of his life. It's only been since he's been sold as a slave into Egypt that he'd be speaking Egyptian all the time. And he probably speaks Egyptian so perfectly, so fluently, no one would ever know that he's not Egyptian. His brothers certainly don't know that it's him, and they certainly don't think this Egyptian governor can speak Hebrew. So they start to talk amongst themselves to figure out a plan, to figure out what they're going to do. I want to read you from the Bible what it says they say. It is so good. It says, then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. Kids, what do the brothers understand? I mean, they've had 3 days to think about this. You know what they've come up with? This terrible thing is happening to us because of what we did to Joseph. Didn't we see the distress in his soul? Maybe Joseph was crying. Maybe Joseph was like, they could see the fear in his eyes. It says right here, when he begged us and we did not listen. Joseph obviously was like, guys, please, 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 don't sell me. I'll change. I'll be better. I'll change. I'm sorry about the coat. I'm sorry about the dreams. Begging them not to sell him. But they sold him anyway. They didn't listen to him. And they think that is why this distress has come upon us. We're being punished. This mess right now in Egypt is happening to us because of what we did to Joseph. Look at what Reuben says. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Reuben's like, I told you guys. Remember Reuben tried to save Joseph? He put him in the pit, and then he was going to bring him back to his dad. And we know for sure it was because he was afraid of facing his dad's punishment for losing him. But certainly he was very upset when Joseph wasn't there, right? Where shall I go now that I don't have the boy, right? Well, Reuben says, I told you so. This is a reckoning for Joseph's blood. They even figure he's probably died. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. All of this they've just said, they don't know that Joseph understands. And this has made Joseph feel so sad. He's so broken up about this. He actually turns away. He doesn't want them to see in his face that he's understood them and that he's so sad. And kids, I think this whole conversation gives Joseph hope. Hope for what? I'm going to tell you about that afterwards, but I think it gives them hope. Well, they made a decision. They think, okay, Simeon will stay. Simeon will stay. And Simeon goes back into jail, and he will remain in jail there until they bring Benjamin back. Well, Joseph makes the order, fill their sacks with grain, and they get all their grain sacks filled. Well, once they make it back home, they tell Jacob, their father, everything that happened. Can you imagine that conversation? Dad, we got there. The guy thought that we were spies. And of course we're not spies. So we had to tell him something. We told him about you and Benjamin and that we were legit. You know, we weren't liars. And then he said that we were going to have to bring Benjamin back to prove what we said was true. Simeon's still there in jail. He wouldn't even let Simeon come back until we show him Benjamin and prove that we are who we said we are. And then they open their grain sacks. And in each one of their grain sacks is the money bag that they should have used to pay for the grain. And Joseph's like, what are you doing to me? What is this you've done? First I lose Joseph, now I lose Simeon? What have you done? Reuben says to his dad, I'll go back. I'll take Benjamin back. I'll show him Benjamin and I'll bring Simeon home. I'll take care of it, Dad. No way. You are not taking Benjamin. I've already lost his brother. You're not taking Benjamin. Dad, Simeon's in jail. What are we going to do? Leave Simeon there? I promise you can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. That's really serious. Reuben's promise. You can kill my 2 sons if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. You know what Jacob says? No, Benjamin doesn't leave. No way. And they leave Simeon in jail. And they go on living their life without Simeon. Well, time passes, guys. Simeon's in jail in Egypt, and the food is running low. And then it's running so low, it's like running out. And so Jacob goes to the brothers and says, you need to go back to Egypt and buy grain. And Judah's like, Dad, no way, we cannot go back there without Benjamin. The governor said that if we didn't come back with Benjamin, that there would be no hope for us. He wouldn't sell us any grain. He's going to kill us. He thinks we're spies. We can't leave without Benjamin. You're not taking Benjamin. Dad, there's no other way. Can you please trust me? Trust me, Dad. I will bring Benjamin back to you. I promise. There's no other way. The man said so. And I pledge it to you. I pledge you can blame me for the rest of my life if I don't bring Benjamin back to you. What other choice do we have? And Jacob, he has no choice. His whole family will starve if he doesn't buy grain from Egypt. They're the only ones that have grain. God worked it out that way. And so Jacob agrees. He's got no other choice. And the 10 brothers go with Benjamin. 11 of them leave. And they go back to Egypt to try and buy more grain, to try and prove they're not liars and spies, to try and get Simeon back. And they're on their way. Well, kids, they're brought before Joseph again. And when Joseph kind of sees them, he sees Benjamin. And he knows, this is my younger brother. This is the one. And so he orders his servants. He's like, okay, take those men, those 11 men, take them to my house. Take them into my house. When the brothers hear that they're being brought to the governor's house, they kind of get freaked out again. They think he's going to beat them because they stole the money. Do you remember they found that bag of money back in all of the mouths of their grain sacks? So they think they're going to get accused of stealing. So they're very nervous. And when they are brought in, the steward, that's Joseph's chief servant, the steward is there, and they're like, oh, you know what? Last time we were here, we got home, and all of our money bags were there, and we're so sorry. We've brought them back to you. And our dad's brought this big present for you to say how thankful we are. And here's the present, and we're so sorry. We didn't steal the money. I don't know what happened. And the steward knows what happened. Joseph ordered that their money was put back in their sacks, right? He says, no, we have all your money. It's fine. God put treasure in your sacks. And the brothers like, what? Well, then Joseph comes in. And when Joseph sees them all, he sees Benjamin. I have a picture to show you about this, guys. He sees Benjamin. And you know what he knows about Benjamin? He knows that Benjamin is his younger brother. They have the same dad, Jacob, but they also have the same mom, Rachel. A sad thing happened. When Rachel was having Benjamin, she died during childbirth. So Benjamin was the last son of Rachel, and it's Joseph's only full brother. And when he sees Benjamin, you guys can see that? He has to leave the room because he's crying. It's too much for him. This is supposed to be Benjamin right there. Those are all the other brothers, and this is Joseph. He looks like an Egyptian, doesn't he? So he leaves the room, he goes outside, and he cries over his brother. This is the first time he's seen him, maybe. And then because he knows they're going to know he's been crying, maybe his eyes were like red and puffy, he washes his face to kind of hide the fact that he's been crying. And then he comes back in, and now things get even weirder. So the brothers are all sat by the servants. They sit them down at the table to have a feast. And the weird thing is, the servants go up to each man and seat them in order of how old they are. Reuben is seated first, then Simeon, all the way down the line to the youngest, Benjamin, all 11 of them in exactly the right birth order. And they start to look at each other and they're like, how would the governor know that? How would he know that? That's not the weirdest thing that happens. Then the food comes out. Okay, I have another picture for that. This one, I hope you can see it. The food is brought out. Everybody gets a plate in front of them, from oldest to youngest. But Benjamin, he gets 5 times the portion of everybody else. It's like he gets 5 plates of food, 5 times the honor. Kids, that was a great honor back then. That was like setting Benjamin apart, that Benjamin is very special. I hope you can see that. And there's Joseph watching their reactions probably. So they're probably talking to each other going, what is going on? Why would Benjamin be honored like that? He's the youngest. Guys, why would Joseph honor Benjamin like that? Well, maybe because he's his full brother. He's his true younger brother. Maybe because Benjamin wasn't there that day. When they sold him into slavery, Benjamin wasn't there. He's the only one at the table that didn't betray Joseph. I don't know what the reason is exactly, but Joseph honors him. Okay, so it says that they have a good time at the feast. It says that they make merry. They enjoy themselves. And then after the feast is done, Joseph orders that their grain sacks are all filled up. They load their donkeys, and at first light, they all set off back to Canaan, back to their dad, Jacob. Okay, well, they don't get very far. It's like dawn. They leave right away, and very shortly after they've left, something happens. I picture them on the road, and they're like, whew, I am so glad we're out of that place. Egypt is weird. What is with that governor? How did he know? How did he know our ages? And I mean, it seems like everybody else got to buy grain and they didn't have such a hard time. But Simeon, we're glad you're back. We're glad this is over. You know what? If I never see Egypt again, I won't mind. I'm so glad. And then on the horizon behind them, there's a figure, maybe galloping out to see them. And they're like, there's someone following us. No, just keep going. Like, we're done with that place. No, there was someone following them. Joseph had sent his chief steward to catch up to them. Joseph had a plan this whole time, and this is part of it. So the chief steward, he shows up, and they're all like, oh my goodness, are you serious? What is going on now? And so he stops them, and they're like, hi. And he says, why would you repay good with evil? We did you good. Why would you repay good with evil? You've done us evil. And they're like, what are you talking about? What? We haven't done you evil. You have stolen my master's silver cup. The silver cup that he uses to practice divination, the Bible says. It's kind of like magic, kind of like telling the future. And what the steward is saying is that the governor of Egypt, who's Joseph, uses this cup. It's special to him. He practices this with it, and you've stolen it. And they're like, we have not stolen it. Are you crazy? When we got back there, we told you about the extra money we found in our grain sacks the first time. We tried to return it to you. Why would you think we've stolen it? No, you've stolen it. Listen, we haven't stolen it. Whoever you find that cup with, you can kill that man. Kill him, and the rest of us will be servants. That's how sure they were they didn't have it. Now, kids, did they steal it? No, of course they didn't steal it. And they knew that. And so they were pretty confident. They're like, whoever you find the cup, you can kill that man, whoever's got it. The rest of us will be your servants. And the servant, the steward says, let it be as you say. Whoever has the cup, he shall be my master's servant forever. He shall come back to Egypt and be my master's servant. The rest of you are innocent. You can go home. Fine, deal. And so from oldest to youngest, they get off their donkey. So it's Reuben first, and he opens his grain sack, and the steward checks it. Nothing's in there. And then Simeon, and all the way down the line. And I kind of think that maybe as the further they got down the line, brother by brother, as each one proved, no cup, I'm innocent, we didn't steal it. As that happened each time, I'm thinking they're feeling a little bit more confident. They're feeling a little bit better, and they're like, see, told ya. Of course we don't have it. We told you that. And then now it's the last brother, Benjamin's turn. And they untie the knot and they open his grain sack. And in my mind, it's a bright day in Egypt. And the sun, like it's a blazing sun. It's a desert, right? And it's like shining down. And they open the grain sack and everybody's like, there's this like flash of light from the top of the sack. There's something in the sack that caught and reflected the sunlight. And they all kind of hide their eyes. And then their hearts begin to like sink, and their hearts begin to pound hard. And the steward walks over, and out of Benjamin's sack, he pulls the silver cup that belongs to the governor of Egypt. And the boys, they're like, well, they're men. The men, they're like, no! And they tear their clothes. Benjamin is guilty. Benjamin has the cup. They know Benjamin didn't take it, but he has the cup. And now he's got to go back to Egypt and be a slave for the governor forever. They've lost Benjamin. How could this happen? Tear the clothes. Remember we talked before that when they were really upset about stuff back then, they used to tear their clothes? They all do that. They're so upset. Well, they're brought back before Joseph again. And Joseph talks to him, and he says to them, what is this that you've done? Why would you do this to me? Don't you know that a man like me, that I can practice divination, that I can kind of magically see the future? Why would you think you could steal my cup? Did Joseph know about the cup because he could see the future? No, he put it there. He told the steward to put the cup in Benjamin's grain sack on purpose, in Benjamin's grain sack. And now Joseph has every right to keep Benjamin as a slave because of that. Joseph has planned all this. This is a setup. Kids, why would Joseph do all of this? Why did he speak roughly to them? Why did he make Simeon stay? Why did he insist Benjamin come back? Why did he accuse them of being spies at all? Why? Is he trying to pay them back for selling him into slavery? Is he trying to get even? Is this revenge? No, this isn't revenge at all. Kids, Joseph is testing them. Joseph is trying to see, have they changed? Here's what Joseph knows about these boys. He knows that years ago, their younger brother's life, his life, was only worth 20 pieces of silver to them. That's all it was worth. He knows that they betrayed him even though it would destroy their father. The boys would have known that. They would have known that if they killed Joseph, or if they left him in a pit, or if they sold him into slavery, whatever, if Joseph didn't come home safe and sound, they knew their dad would have been devastated. And they did it anyway. They hated Joseph so much, and they were so selfish, they did it anyway. And they didn't care that they crushed their father. Well, this is a test. This is a test to see if they've changed and where their hearts are. No, he's already heard them speaking in Hebrew that first time. He heard them say, oh, this is a reckoning. Oh, we're in this distress because we didn't listen to Joseph. He begged us and we didn't listen to him. And they feel that guilt. What will they do? What are they going to do? Benjamin has to stay, and the rest of them can go free. That's the deal. If they want to, they can leave Benjamin in jail there, and all of them can go back with their grain. They're all innocent, and they can go back home. Are they going to leave him there? Are they going to betray him there like they did Joseph? That is what Joseph is trying to find out. Well, kids, Judah is the one that speaks. It's not Reuben, who's the oldest. It's Judah this time. And I've been telling you all along, remember Judah, right? Judah's the same brother. He came up with the idea of selling Joseph in the first place. He's like, let's not kill him. Let's make some money. And they sold him to the Ishmaelites, right? So Judah comes and speaks, and I love, he begs Joseph, can I please, sir, can I talk to you? I love what he says. He says, sir, we came here, and you accused us of being spies. So we told you about our dad and our younger brother. And then you asked us, you said, you have to bring your younger brother back to me in order to prove that you're not spies. And so now we've done that. But what you don't understand, sir, governor, your eminence, whatever he calls him, what you don't understand is there used to be 12 of us. This boy is the younger brother. His older brother was lost. And my dad, he loves him so much. It's his joy. This boy that you want to keep in prison, this is our father's joy. Please, you don't understand. If we show up without Benjamin, he's going to die. I fear what's going to happen to him. He's going to die. Please, you can't take Benjamin from us. And I pledged myself. I was a pledge. Listen to how he ends his speech, okay, kids? This is in Genesis 44. Judah says, now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. Kids, Judah says two very important things. He says, take me instead. Let Benjamin go free and I will stay. I will serve you the rest of my life. Take me instead. You know why? Because I'm afraid of what this is going to do to my dad. Judah's no longer afraid of being in trouble, not like Reuben was way back then. Judah says, it's going to kill him. I couldn't even bear to see what it would do to my dad. Please let Benjamin go instead. Take me instead. What a powerful thing. Kids, I got to put some stuff up on the board because here is where we see God's grace glimpsed in a life pointing to the Messiah, okay? So I'm going to put something up here. Judah is the brother who does this, okay? And Judah says, let me be a sacrifice. Let me be the sacrifice instead. I'll stay here. And Judah says, I'll switch places, right? I will pay his servant fee. I'll be the slave. I'll pay. Let him go free. Let him go home with his brothers. And why does he do this, kids? Judah tells us why. He does it to save his brother, and he does it, and this is really important, for the love of his father. So Judah sacrifices himself. He switches places with Benjamin. He does it to save Benjamin, and he does it because he loves his father, and he's afraid of how this is going to just destroy his dad, kill him maybe. Kids, who do we see this in? Way, way, way in the future from when this happens. Who do we see this in? Whose life? In Jesus's, of course, right? This is a little glimpse of what Jesus would do. I mean, Judah gets to do it here back in history. Jesus would do it ultimately, and he would do it for us. He wouldn't just be saving a brother. He'd be saving all of humankind, everyone who's ever been born. And why did Jesus do it, kids? Jesus did it for the love of his Father. His Father asked him to. His dad asked him to save us. And Jesus said yes and obeyed him perfectly. He even obeyed him to the point of doing what we couldn't do. He came and lived a perfect life, obeying his Father, just like what we couldn't do. And because of that, he earned the reward that we could never earn. The reward that God had promised us. Life eternal with the Father. So when Jesus does that and sacrifices himself on the cross, he switches places with us. We're the ones that should have died. And instead, Jesus dies on the cross. He pays the price for our sin. He gives us the reward that he earned, and he switches places completely with us. Then Jesus rises. He doesn't stay dead. And by the power of all of what happens, if we put our faith in him, if we trust him alone for our salvation, if we believe Jesus died and that's the only way that I can be saved, because he died for me, because he lived a perfect life for me, and because he raised, he's in heaven with his Father now. If we believe that and we repent, asking God to forgive us, confessing our sin and turning from our sin, asking God to forgive us for that sin and not sinning anymore, when we do that, kids, we can be saved too by what Jesus did on the cross. And him switching places, he can switch places with us. Jesus switched places with me when I was 4 years old. God opened my eyes. He showed me that I was a sinner at 4. He showed me how much I needed him. And I prayed right then and there. I said how sorry I was. And I asked God to be the Lord of my life. I wanted him to be God. And I told him that I believed in him alone. That was no other way except for faith in him. And I was a Christian. And God has saved me ever since because of that. I'm so thankful of that, guys. And that is what we want for you. Well, kids, that is exactly what Judah did in a small scale, imperfectly, way back a couple thousand years ago, thousands of years ago, okay? And he tells Joseph, this governor, this Egyptian governor, this stranger, he tells him, take me instead. It's going to kill my father. I love the father. I've got to switch places with him. Well, all of this is too much for Joseph to handle. He can't even take it anymore. And he says to the servants, out, everybody you're out. He kicks them all out. All of his servants and his steward, everybody, they're all out. So it's just the brothers and Joseph. And then Joseph cries. He cries, he wails, he's bawling his eyes out. It says he cries so loud that all those servants he just kicked out, they heard him anyway, and that all the servants and the people in Pharaoh's house heard Joseph crying. He weeps over his brothers and he says to them, "It's me. It's Joseph who you sold. It's me." And the brothers are like, I can only imagine like, dun, 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 this is the moment, right? And they're like, what? And it says they felt ashamed, right? They were dismayed at what they'd done. And now here this is Joseph. Can you imagine that, kids? Okay, well, Joseph says something incredible to them. And I just want to show you this. This is our last little picture. Here's a nice picture of Joseph talking to them afterwards. And he explains something to them. There, he's got his hand on Benjamin. He hugs Benjamin big time, hugs and kisses. He hugs all of them, and he talks to all of them, and he says something amazing to his brothers, okay? "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." Wait for it. "And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life, to save life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God." I read that, kids, and I am blown away. Can you imagine Joseph's understanding? Now Joseph is pointing to the Messiah, right? Joseph, here's what he understands. Guys, all the last years that I've been here, a slave, sold, betrayed, in jail, all those years, God was doing it. It wasn't even you. He wanted me here for a very important reason. And Joseph may not have even seen it until he saw those brothers bow before him that day. Remember the dream? Right? Whoa, the dream. There his brothers are bowing before him, and he sees them and he recognizes them. Joseph probably realized, this is why God did all this, to save my family. And that's what he tells them. He was saving a remnant. He wants to save Dad and you and your kids. You're his people. He wants to save you. And he used me to do it. So he brought me here. And yeah, you sold me, and that stunk. But it was God who organized all of this to work out his great plan to love our family and to save our family. Isn't that amazing? So don't be angry with yourselves. I'm not angry with you. And he probably should have been. I'm not angry with you. This is all from God. Kids, how would Joseph have been able to see all that? How would he have had that good attitude about everything? That was from God too. We don't get that on our own. That is from God. All these great things that people are able to do is from God. And so was that. And so Joseph forgives them and he hugs them and he says, this was to save you. And it does save them. He tells them, go back and get Dad. Get all your families. Get all your flocks. Get everything. The famine is going to be very, very bad for 5 more years. I want you here in Egypt with me, and I'll keep you safe. And they do. They go back, they get Jacob, he's an old man. They get all the brothers' wives and kids, and they bring them all back to Egypt. And they settle a special land in Goshen in Egypt, and God has saved Jacob, he saved his tribe, the children of Israel, and he saved them all through Joseph's life. I love reading the Bible. I have to tell you, I love reading the Bible because everything in this book all points to God's great love for us, to his greatness, and to his plan to save us, and it's amazing. And when you read it, when you look for things, it's just the coolest thing as you see them. It's like, wow, that's amazing. And so we see Judah's life point to Jesus and what he would do to save us years and years and years later from now. You know the other cool thing about Judah? Judah was of the 12 brothers, he was the one that God chose. Chose for what? God chose Judah above all the others. That was the family he was going to use to have the Messiah born into. So the Messiah would come from Judah's line. So there was all the 12 brothers, but Judah would have a son who would have a son who would have a son, and Judah would be the great, like a bunch of greats, grandfather of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Messiah, and their Lord and Messiah. It would come from Judah's family. That's amazing too. And that's why I kept telling you, remember Judah of the boys. He's the one at the end that steps up and he shows us this self-sacrifice like Jesus. And he's the one that God chose in the end to bless the world through his family. That's where God would continue that blessing, the Messiah coming through Judah's line. It's so cool. Okay, kids, thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back. Hopefully I'll see you next week. We all miss you so much here. Okay, bye.